We're talking about the giant of uncertainty. And the giant of uncertainty can pop into your life a number of different ways in a moment. And when uncertainty comes into our lives, it can really mess with our view of our future and how and what we're supposed to do next. Uncertainty can become a giant that traps us and paralyzes us. Uncertainty can become a giant that steals our focus away from where it needs to be, and it can lead us down all different kinds of rabbit trails in life. The giant of uncertainty is a giant that can pop up in a moment as our circumstances shift. And maybe you're in a place where your circumstances have been pretty steady, and if that's the case, well then, I'm super pumped for you. But it only takes a moment, one sentence, one conversation with a doctor, one bad day on the stock market, one day where someone you love is pulling away from you to change all of the certainty you have about life and about who you are and about where God is leading you. One slip, one shift, and you're thrown into a world of uncertainty. I used to love going whitewater rafting up in Jim Thorpe. I don't do it anymore, and quite frankly, that's because it's really hard to top the experience I'm about to share with you right now. We would take a bunch of kids up to Jim Thorpe to do whitewater rafting in their dam release days. It was fun. If you know anything about Jim Thorpe up there, the river, it's not really whitewater rafting. On dam day, dam release day, there's like maybe 100-yard, 200-yard stretch that actually has white water, and that actually gets a little tricky navigating it with a raft full of teenagers. And this was one of those dam release days. It was beautiful out, and we were taking about 40 students up to this trip. My leadership team and I, we were taking 40 students up to Jim Thorpe to go whitewater rafting, and we were super pumped about it. And what was really exciting for me is that I ended up driving a car with two of my leaders and none of the kids, which was thrilling because they're just so loud and they don't stop. We're heading up there with my friend Brad. Now, you need to know this about Brad. He looks like he could be a linebacker on any football team that's playing today. He's 6'4", 300 pounds, strapping dude, big, huge, intense guy, great heart. And my other friend who was riding up with us that day was Tiffany. And Tiffany they were both my youth leaders, and somehow we ended up in a car with none of the students, and it was Tiffany's first trip whitewater rafting, and she was extremely nervous about it, not knowing what to expect or what it was going to look like. And so driving up to Jim Thorpe, the conversation broke down to Tiffany saying, I don't think I'm going to go whitewater rafting. I'm a little bit nervous about it. Maybe I'll just wait. I've never done it before. Maybe I'll just wait at the pavilion where we all kind of launch from and where we all come back to share a meal. And Brad and I would take turns, good cop, bad cop in it. And I would say, Tiffany, you don't have anything to worry about, and it's going to be great. This is like just floating on a lake, pretty much. It's pretty much just floating on a lake. Don't worry about it. Come on, you're going to come. You're going to come in the raft with us. We'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry. She'd be like, okay, shoo, that makes me feel a lot better. And then a minute later, Brad would be like, yeah, but you remember that kid died last year? And like the rafts always turn over. I don't know what we're going to do when the rafts turn over again this year. And man, this is the highest the water's ever been. This is going to be a really crazy trip. I hope we all make it back. And Tiffany would be like, wait a minute. I thought you said it was going to be nice and a good trip. And we'd be like, oh, just kidding, Tiffany, just kidding. Just make sure when you fall in, you keep your feet downstream. That's what they tell you, just keep your feet downstream. By the time we got up to Jim Thorpe, Tiffany was all screwed up. She had no idea what to expect, but she decided to trust us. Mistake number one. We were just messing with Tiffany. Really, the river is so easy, and it's such a fun day. And we get on this river, and it's me and Brad and Tiffany, and then like 6 junior high girls. And Brad's huge, and I'm trying to keep up on the other side. But every time Brad would take one stroke, it would just spin the boat sideways. We're having a ton of fun, and we come to the stretch where no problems whatsoever. We come to the stretch where it's actually a little bit of white water. And if you've ever done this trip up there, you know that at the top of that stretch, there's a big rock that sits mostly under the water with a little bit of the top edge of it outside of the water. And at the end of the stretch of white water, there's a little rock about this big that sticks out of the water. This was about the only time on the trip you actually had to concentrate and work together, but Brad and I got out of sync at exactly the wrong moment. As we're coming to the rock at the top of the rapids, our raft turns sideways and wedges itself up on the rock. And if you know anything about water, it doesn't stop just because you turn sideways, right? So water fills our boat, and our boat is sinking and stuck on the side of the rock. And Brad panics. He jumps out of the boat, grabs Tiffany, and yells, "Let's go!" Kind of like that. Kind of like that. I've been practicing that. I think that's pretty close to, "Let's go!" And he grabs Tiffany, and they jump out on the rock. But when they jump out on the rock, everything shifted. The weight shifted. The raft pops up now and starts moving away from them as they stand on the rock. What are you going to do? Obviously, jump for it. Obviously, jump for it, but not far enough or fast enough. And as the boat moves away with me and 6 junior high girls in it, Brad and Tiffany make a leap for the boat and miss and land in the water. And now they're floating downstream through the rapids backwards. Brad, I can't stop laughing at this point. I'm just gonna be really honest. I don't even care if you judge me. This was by far the funniest thing I've ever seen on a river, and I fly fish with my dad, so I see a lot of funny stuff. I see a lot of funny stuff on a river, and this is by far the king of funny moments. If I close my eyes right now, I'm going to start laughing, and I won't be able to finish the story. The girls in the boat are scared to death, and they now think I'm a psycho because I'm laughing at them as they're floating down the water, and all I can think to do is yell, "Get your feet downstream!" Like, they're not going to be able to get their feet downstream. I can't even get it out without laughing some more. And I look over just in time to see Brad. He's grabbing onto a raft of tourists, and these tourists are little. I mean, the heaviest one probably weighed $135. Like, I'm not even kidding. They spoke very little English, and Brad's jumping out of the water and grabbing onto the side, and I feel like this is how he's feeling. That's why my voice did that. Grabs onto the edge, and they're trying to help him. So there's like 6 guys trying to grab, wee little guys, trying to grab Brad and pull him up onto the raft. And Brad's going, "Whoa, whoa." And then they realize that Brad's sinking their raft. He's sinking their raft. So panic comes across their faces, and they go from trying to rescue Brad to pushing him off with their feet, and they're pushing on his head and his hands with their feet, and finally they win, and they pop Brad back off into the rapids. Meanwhile, Tiffany's just bobbing up and down in the water. They're both heading for the little rock at the end of the rapids, and they make it, and they're on that little rock. Brad and Tiffany with the saddest faces you've ever seen, which just makes this story so delightful. Waiting as the guide comes over to our side of the stream to help us bucket out our raft so that we can go and pick them up. It took me like 20 minutes to stop laughing, and Brad and Tiffany wouldn't talk to me for the rest of the day, but it was so worth it. You see, sometimes you're going through life, cruising down the stream, and something just shifts a little. And the certainty of what I had done this trip tons of times, never had an issue, never had a problem, never lost anybody off the raft. But a sudden shift at just the wrong time, unexpected, one moment can shift you from certainty to uncertainty. And you get thrown into a place where what you once trusted to be true about you and about life and about your relationships and about your health is all thrown into question. Uncertainty. It only takes a moment. It only takes a sentence for it to creep into life and throw everything off. I don't know, maybe you've wrestled with uncertainty. Maybe it's come at the hands of a sentence from a doctor who gave you a report you never expected to hear about yourself. Maybe uncertainty has come in a strained relationship with your kids or your parents or your spouse, a strained relationship that you never would have predicted, you never would have saw coming. Maybe uncertainty has crept into your life in a job situation or a financial situation that somehow you felt like you had a sense of security about, and then all of a sudden everything changes. Maybe uncertainty in your life has crept in when you've lost a dream. You've lost your sense of purpose, or you've lost somebody that meant a ton to you. In Joshua chapter 1, this guy named Joshua, who would be the leader of Israel and usher them towards the promise God had for them. Joshua, this guy who was the apprentice of Moses, one of the greatest leaders in all of history and all of the Bible. Moses, the one who had led an entire nation of about 2 million people out of the bondage and slavery in Egypt. Moses, who had led them through the wilderness for 40 years as Joshua had apprenticed by his side. This guy Joshua, he slips into an uncertain moment with one sentence in Joshua chapter 1. It says this, it says, after the death of Moses, in verse 1, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, one sentence, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them. One sentence, and Joshua's faced with extreme loss. I mean, Joshua had apprenticed at Moses' side since he was a youth. He had been around. He had seen some stuff. If there ever was a father figure close to Joshua, it had to be Moses. I mean, they spent every day together, leading together. Joshua would sit outside the tent when Moses would speak to God, listening in on the conversations. When Moses went up to get the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, Joseph went most of the way up with him as far as he could and met him on his way down and came down with him. Joshua had been there. He had seen the mistakes. He had seen the success. He had listened to the people. And Moses was his guy. He loved Moses. And here in one sentence, God informs Joshua, hey, Moses is dead. And you have a really big job in front of you. See, you're going to lead 2 million of the most difficult people. 2 million of the people with the worst attitude. They complain about everything. They're consistently discontent with their circumstances. You got to lead this unruly, this rebellious, this rambunctious, this disrespectful bunch across a river that would be impossible to cross at flood stage by yourself to the promise that I have waiting for you. And uncertainty had to slip in to Joshua's heart as he was met with his loss. I hope you don't have experience with loss. I hope uncertainty hasn't crept into your life by you losing someone important to you and losing someone close to you, or even losing a dream. You see, grief, it feels a lot like fear, and it can spark uncertainty, and you can bet Joshua was uncertain about what he was going to do and how he was going to do it, and he was missing Moses hard. And God, he says, like everything's changed. It was so consistent. It was so comfortable, your role, and now it's all changed with one sentence. You see, sometimes in life, it just takes a sentence to throw us from certainty to uncertainty. And when you're facing uncertain moments, you can be certain of this one thing, that no matter what you're facing, no matter how your circumstances has shifted, no matter what kind of struggles you're facing in life, no matter how thick the uncertainty you are wrestling with, you can be certain that God is still the same. It says this in Numbers chapter 23 and verse 19. It says, God is not human that he should lie. He's not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it. No matter what the circumstances of your life look like, no matter how life and relationships shift for you, God is the same God. And this is good news. If it's not good news, it's because you don't understand who God truly is. You see, God has always been for you. He has always been working in your life to prepare you and bring you to this place. He has always loved you with an unconditional love that was not defined by how you act or behave or identify. God's love has been consistent and perfect because He is consistent and perfect, and He does not change. That's why we can say with confidence, He loves you right as you are. No strings attached, no qualifiers. God loves you unconditionally, and that means that there's nothing you can do to make God love you more, and there's nothing you can do to make God love you less, but you cannot change God's love for you because God doesn't change. And in the face of uncertainty, you can take great confidence in the fact that while life changes and relationships shift, God never does. His stance towards you is that He's for you. And even if you wanted to change that, you couldn't. The circumstances of life, they can never steal that from you. That's why it says in Romans, there's no height nor depth. There's no distance, no, not heaven, not hell, not angels, not demons. There's nothing that can separate you from the love of God. In Hebrews 13:8, it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. When everything else shifts into uncertainty, you can be certain that God is for you, and that even when you cannot see it, it hasn't changed Him. That's why in verse 3, God goes on, and immediately after injecting one sentence that was sure to leak uncertainty into Joshua's life, he follows it up with, I will give you every place where you set your foot. How awesome is that? Like, hey man, it's all changed. You lost the most important person in your life, and I'm giving you a task that seems impossible. It's all changed, but I'm going to give you every place you stick your foot. He goes on and he says, as I promised Moses, your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, and all the Hittite country to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors. Immediately after introducing uncertainty into his life, God follows it up and says, I haven't changed, and my promise, it still sticks. I've always been for you. I'm still for you. You need to remember this, Joshua. Whatever it looks like next, whatever happens, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to forsake you. You're not in this by yourself. I got your back. I'm going to go with you in every place, my promise. Every place you step your foot, it's going to be yours. You can be certain in the midst of uncertainty that God is for you and He doesn't change. Yet, there was still a rough road ahead. Wouldn't that be nice? Like you go to church and you're like, yeah, let's get all fired up. Let's sing some songs. Let's hear a so-so sermon, and then we get pumped up, and then we'll go outside, right? And like everything's going to be different. Everything's going to be great. And you like walk out the doors, drive through the parking lot. By the time you get to the road out there, life like smacks you in the face, and you're like, well, that was nice when it lasted. While it lasted. That was nice while it lasted. That was nice while it lasted. Right? Like sometimes you can't even get to your car before life. Can I just get some help in here? Clearly I need it. Sometimes you can't even get to your car before life smacks you in the face. Sometimes you don't even get out these doors before life smacks you in the face with an unwelcome reminder that your road ahead still looks difficult, that it's still going to be hard. And though God reminded Joshua of an important message that he needed to hear, there was still what seemed like an impossible task ahead of him. The impossible journey of leading 2 million, the most rebellious people ever recorded, 2 million of the most discontent, complaining people with the worst attitudes ever recorded in the Bible, 2 million, across a river that on a normal day was 100 foot wide and 3 to 10 feet deep. To take 2 million wives, moms, dads, kids, livestock, cattle across a river into the promised land. And this river was at flood stage. I don't know if you've spent a lot of time in rivers. I have. I've waded a lot of rivers. Like, I can't even get my dad across rivers without one of us almost dying. I can't imagine. You're welcome for that. I can't imagine this task. It looked so impossible. Have you ever tried to get like 3 toddlers to eat their vegetables all at once? Like, you got the dinner, like, without stuff dripping off the table onto the carpet. Have you ever tried to get a couple of kids to eat all their food and to sit there? Like, that's impossible enough for me. You ever try to get a bunch of middle schoolers to sleep at an all-nighter? Like, you ever try to do that? Like, get them in? You won't even be able to get them to just breathe because they're talking too fast, let alone sleep. That seems like impossible to me. You ever try to get your parents to change their routine? Come on. Impossible. I couldn't imagine how impossible it would have seemed. This task of leading this nation all at once across a flooded Jordan River. But don't let what seem like impossible circumstances, don't let uncertainty of how you're going to face tomorrow steal the promise that God has for you. See, He's promised that He will be with you no matter what. He has promised His love to you, His forgiveness for you through Jesus on the cross. He has promised a future that is better than you could imagine, it says in Ephesians. One that's greater than anything you could have asked for. Don't let the uncertainty of life and the seemingly impossible circumstances steal and distract your attention from what God has for you. All good things, James teaches us, all good things come from our Father in heaven. It would have been an understatement to say that this was an impossible task. And Joshua would have known it. It says in Numbers chapter 11 and verse 28 that he had been with Moses the entire time as his aide. In Exodus 32 and chapter 15 to 18, Moses is bringing down what we refer to as the 10 Commandments from the mountain, and Joshua meets him, and as they continue down, he had heard the sound of the rebellion below. In fact, he says to Moses, it sounds like they're at war down there, and Moses says, that's not war. I mean, Joshua knew that this was an impossible task with an impossible people, and Moses knew it too. In fact, before Moses died in Deuteronomy in chapter 31, Moses had called Joshua to him and said to him in the presence of all Israel, be strong and courageous. You know, when somebody starts a conversation with that kind of sentence, you're in trouble. Like, it's not a good thing that follows, hey, come here, be strong and courageous. Because there's always a because after that, right? Like, because your world's about to fall apart. Hey, be strong and courageous because I'm about to ask you to do something that is really scary. Moses, he says, be strong and courageous for you must go with these people into the land. Like, that's a trip, man. Be strong and courageous because you have to go with them. Hey, you're going to hosses with those people, like be strong and courageous. You're getting lunch with the people that sit on the left side of church after church, you better be strong and courageous. Like be strong and courageous because you have to go with these people. You're going to lead these people, Moses says, to the land that God swore to their ancestors to give them. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. You see, Joshua had a sense of the impossible circumstances that lied in front of him. And Moses knew it too. And God knew it would seem impossible to Joshua. And he knows that some of you are staring down circumstances in your relationships, in your life, in your workplace. He knows that some of you are staring down circumstances that seem impossible to you, too. Which is why he says, you're never going to have to do it alone. It's why he reminds Joshua of who he is. That's why he gives him the playbook. You see, he says this. He says, after that, he says in verse 7, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. See, this is about stepping into success as God defines it for your life, and it's the best kind of success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. See, God knew it would seem impossible, so he says, you're never going to have to do this alone. I'm going to remind you of what you have in you, what I've given you in you. See, Joshua, he needed to understand that no matter what the circumstances looked like, he was always with God. He needed God to remind him that though uncertainty of our circumstances will always help us see the worst in us, that God had given him character, had prepared him for this moment. Joshua was always strong and courageous. Joshua was a warrior. He fought on the battlefield while Moses held his arms up on the mountain. Joshua had always been a strong dude, a courageous dude, and God's just pointing out to him the things that God had given to him. He was pointing to Joshua and who he was in God. And he says, you got the playbook right here. And maybe some of you need to be reminded today that in the midst of uncertainty, God's never going to leave you alone. He will never ask you to walk through a circumstance by yourself, and you may feel alone. You may not have the support around you that you wish you had, but you always have him no matter where you go. Maybe some of you need to be reminded today of who you are in Christ. Not the weaknesses you have that are flared up by the circumstances. That you need to be reminded today that you have strength in God, that you have courage in God, that He will use your weaknesses and build you up and provide for you what you need to take on the task in front of you. And maybe some of you just need to be reminded that this playbook is full of promises for you. That this playbook is a reminder of who God is and who you are in Him. That this playbook is a map you can follow with your life towards the success and the promises God has laid out in front of you. Listen, in the next chapter, they go through some stuff and they come up to this river, and the whole nation, Joshua says, get up and let's go. Like they get up, and the priests, they're carrying the covenant of God, and it was the container God instructed them to build, the Ark of the Covenant that had the 10 Commandments, and it was foreshadowing towards Jesus, and it was a reminder of who God is and His presence with this people. And they put God at the front, and then they reached out their foot and stepped into the uncertainty of a flooding river, and the water backs up and stops at a town upstream, and they walk 2 million people as they hold the Ark of the Covenant in the middle of the stream. They walk by this reminder on dry land that God was with them no matter what, and they start their journey into the promise God has for them. Start your journey into the promise God has for you by putting Him front and saying, I'm going to follow you through uncertainty. I'm just going to take one next step. Let God lead, and have the courage to take one step to follow Him. Right after, in Joshua chapter 1, God says to him, do not be afraid, the Lord will be with you wherever you go. It says, so Joshua. What's the so for you? Understanding that God is with you wherever you go, understanding that who you are in Him, understanding that He has laid it all out right here. What's the next step in following Him through uncertainty? Because a promise awaits you at the other end. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you that in the midst of the uncertainty of life, we can follow you with confidence, because when everything else changes, you don't change. You're the same yesterday, today, and forever. And you are for us. You love us. You have promises for our lives. To God, we thank you for your love and for pursuing us with that love on the cross. Without that, we have nothing. Would you help us to have the courage to put you at the front and just to follow you one step at a time. In Jesus' name, amen.